Hello, I'm happy that I can welcome you here to the repetition, lesson number 7 of the esoteric lessons of the School of Spiritual Science, the first class, like it was given from Rudolf Steiner, 1924. Like I also said before, this is an esoteric lesson. It's a guide to meditation and a work with mantrams, and we can justifiably call it a divine service, a Christian Michael divine service. Therefore, I would ask you, as far as you consider it justified and that it seriously to watch and listen to it in a concentrated and reverently way, to take care being able to experience it as undisturbed and consciously as possible. Many heartful thanks for that. We are in something like Rudolf Steiner said, it is the time of turning, the turning time for the human being, that we have to beware that there is a Godfather, a God-Son, and a God of spiritual, and a hierarchy of angels, and they are the creators of human being, of the earth. And we now becoming a being of self-consciousness, though that we have to pick up the responsibility on our own development. And this time it shows us what the dark forces, what we call the devil, what anthroposophical called is Ahriman, is holding for us for the future, what they are planning. We see it around the world, trying to manipulate and destroy the possibilities of our human being, of the body. There is an attack, a slowly attack which we can sometimes not feel, is attack with electromagnetic frequencies, with poisons in our food, with poisons in the atmosphere, with lies about illness and lies about vaccinants again, the medicals again, that which have one target: to destroy our body's possibilities, to give our soul and our spirit the possibility to get into connection with the soul's world and the spiritual world. And they want to make an IT dictatorship, which is more evil than any dictatorship we have ever seen in history of human being. This is the one way, let's say it's going down in hell, if we don't do anything against that. And it is the responsibility of the human being to aware that there is also another way. It is what the good spirits are holding for us. They want to show us that we can become a being of freedom, a being of love and spiritual being, if we decide to step into the right Christian way of being, and to try to work on our own and try how we are handling the interference, the connections with our human beings around, with our brothers and sisters. And to change this kind of world we see now, which is destroying the nature, the earth, and destroying the social organism, what is the being together. We have to create a new idea of human being, the idea of a human being which is a spiritual being with a soul and a body, incarnated to develop himself and to help develop each other, our brothers and sisters. So it is our decision to stop this Ahrimanic kind of destroying and beginning to creation a new future of human being, which is a Christian future, which is a future of a social organism, which is brotherhood in economy, which is same rights for everyone in the justice system, and which means freedom of thinking and speaking and religion in the spiritual area of human being. So let's start with lesson number 7. It is a repetition lesson and the last lesson which we have got from Rudolf Steiner. My dear sisters and brothers, since the Christmas conference, an esoteric breath flows through the whole Anthroposophical Society, and those members of the Anthroposophical Society who have taken part in the General Members' lectures will have noted how this esoteric breath flows through all the work within the anthroposophical movement now and should do so in the future. This was a necessity which above all flows from the spiritual world, from where the revelations come, which should live in the anthroposophical movement. Therefore, the necessity arose to create a certain nucleus for anthroposophical esoteric life, to create real esoteric life, and therewith the necessity arose to build a bridge to the spiritual world itself. In certain sense, the spiritual world had to manifest the will for the creation of such a school. For an esoteric school cannot be created by human arbitrariness, nor from the human ideas called human ideals. Rather must the esoteric school be the body for something which flows out of spiritual life, though that everything that occurs in such a school presents the outer expression of an activity which is reality occurs in the spiritual world itself. Therefore, this esoteric school could not have been created without first asking the will of Michael, of the Archangel Michael, which since the last third of the 19th century has been guiding human affairs, something which I have often mentioned here in members' lectures. In the course of time, this will of Michael again and again cyclically intervenes in human affairs from the spiritual world. And when we look back in the evolution of time, we find that this same Michael will, which can also call the Michael Rhine, was active in the spiritual affair of humanity in the great questions of civilization before the mystery of Golgotha. in the time of Alexander in Greek, through the Chthonian and celestial mysteries, and which was to spread to Asia and Africa, where the Michael will reigns, there is always cosmopolitanism. What differences peoples on earth is overcome during the Michael Age. And the most important influence related to Aristotle and to Alexander, which was under the impulse of Michael, was followed by that of Oriphel, and after Oriphel came the Anael impulse, the Zachariel impulse, then the Raphael impulse, then the Samael impulse, then the Gabriel impulse of the Archangel Gabriel, which extended into the 19th century, and since the 17th of the 19th century we are again under the sign of Michael's reign. It is in its beginning, but Michael's impulse must flow into all legitimate esoteric activities in a conscious manner. What can be clear to you, my sisters and brothers, through the general lecture for members and everything connected with the Christmas conference on the 25th of December 1923, leads to what is constituted as the basis of the anthroposophical movement's formation of the esoteric school, inspired and guided by Michael. It therefore rightfully exists in our time as a spiritual institution. All those who want to be rightful members of this school must accept this in their lives with the deepest sincerity. They must feel that they don't merely belong to an earthly community, but to a super-sensible community, whose guide and leader is Michael himself. Therefore, everything communicated here is not to be understood as my words, insofar as they are the content of the lesson, but rather as what Michael communicates in an esoteric manner to those who feel they belong with him in this age. Therefore, what these lessons contain will be Michael's message for our age. And it is because of this that the anthroposophical movement will receive its true spiritual strength. For this it is necessary that what membership in this school means to be taken with the utmost earnestness. It is really necessary, my dear sisters and brothers, truly and deeply necessary, that it be indicated in the utmost earnest manner, the scared earnestness with which the school must be taken. And here within the school it must be repeatedly said, in anthroposophical circles there is much too little earnestness for what really flows through the anthroposophical movement, and at least the esoteric members of the esoteric school must be in the forefront of what humanity can gradually develop as a necessary earnestness. Therefore, it is necessary that the leadership of the school retain for itself the right to allow only those to enter as rightful worthy members of the school who in every aspect of their life want to be worthy representative of anthroposophy, and a decision about whether this is the case or not must lie with the school's leadership. Do not consider this, my sisters and brothers, as a limitation of freedom. The school's leadership must also have its freedom and be able to recognize who belongs to the school and who does not, just as each one is free to decide whether to belong to the school or not. So a free, ideal spiritual contract, so to speak, between each member of the school and the leadership must be agreed upon. In no other way could esoteric development be called healthy, especially not one which is worthy of the fact that this esoteric school exists under the direct force of the mighty impulse itself. Conscious care of the mantric verses so that they do not fall into unauthorized hands in the first requisite, but also to really be a worthy representative of the anthroposophical cause. I only need to mention a few things to show how little the anthroposophical movement is still grasped with complete earnestness. It has happened that members of the school have reserved their seats by placing on them the blue membership certifications which give them the right to participate in the school. It has happened in the Anthroposophical Society that whole piles of the news sheets only intended for members have been found on the trolley cars they run from Dornach to Basel, and I could add many other examples of this list. And amazing things happen as a result of the lack of earnestness, even with things that in everyday life are taken seriously at the moment when those within the anthroposophical movement are expected to do so. They do not take them seriously. These are things which must be considered in connection with the firm structure that this school must have. Therefore these things must be said, because if they are not observed, one can worthily receive what is given here in the school to revelations from the spiritual world. At the end of each lesson, your attention is expressly drawn to the fact that the being of Michael is present, while the revelations from the spiritual world are given and are confirmed by Michael's sign and seal. All these things must live in the member's heart, and worthiness, proud-found worthiness, must reign in all that is bound, even in thought of the school. For only in this way what today is to be carried through the world as an esoteric stream can live, and that includes the duties incumbent on each individual. The mantric verses written here on the blackboard can only be possessed in the strictest sense of the word by those who have the right to be present. And if a member of the school is unable to attend a lesson during which mantric verses are given, another member who has the verses may give them to him, but it must be for each individual case, that is, for each person to whom the verses are to be given. That permission must be requested either from Dr. Wegmann or from me. Once permission is granted in respect to a person, it remains valid, but permission must again be requested for each other individual. This is not an administrative rule, it is an occult rule that must be strictly adhered to. For every act of the school must be connected to the school's leadership, and that begins with having a request permissions from the school's leadership for acts having to do with the school. Not the one who is to receive the mantras may ask, but only the one who is give them using the modality that I have just described. If someone takes notes on what is said here, expected the mantras, he is obligated to keep them for only 1 week and then to burn them. All these things are now arbitrary rules, but they relate to the occult fact the esoteric matters are only effective if they are embraced by the school members' attitude. The mantras lose their effectiveness if they fall into the wrong hands. And it is a rule so firmly inscribed in the cosmic order that the following once happened, and a whole group of mantras which had been in effect within the anthroposophical movement have been rendered ineffective. I was able to give mantric verses to a number of people. I also gave them to a certain person who had a friend. The friend was somewhat clairvoyant, and it happened that while the 2 friends were sleeping in the same room, the clairvoyant friend, when the other one merrily repeated a mantra in thought, surreptitiously copied it and then did mischief with it by giving it to others as coming from himself. It was necessary to look into the matter, which revealed why the mantra became ineffective for all those who possessed it. I want to say some words to this. Nowadays we know the whole class lessons are documented, and there was, for copyright reasons, the necessity to print it and publish it. And so nowadays we can find it everywhere in the world, also on internet. So it changed something with the mantras, and it changed something with the lessons. And find out what has happened with it. Therefore, my dear sisters and brothers, you must not take these things lightly, for esoteric rules are strict. And when someone has made such an error, he should not excuse himself by claiming that he was unable to avoid it. Of course, if someone runs through a mantra in his mind and someone else copies it clairvoyantly, he certainly can do nothing about it. Nevertheless, the rules are applied with an iron necessity. I mention this so that you can see how little arbitrariness is involved and how these things are being read from the spiritual world, and that the practice of the spiritual world apply. Nothing is arbitrary in what occurs in a rightly existing esoteric school. And the earnestness from this esoteric school should stream out to the whole anthroposophical movement, for only then will this school be what it should be for the anthroposophical movement. But when something is done which only springs from personal motives, and then it is pretended that it is because of devotion to the anthroposophical movement, well, I don't mean to say that it should not happen, because obviously people today must be personal, but then it is also necessary that truth lives in what is personal. That, for instance, if someone comes here to Dornach for personal pleasure, he should admit it and not pretend otherwise. There's nothing wrong with coming to Dornach for personal pleasure. In fact, it is good, but one should admit it and not sidestep it by declaring poor dedication to spiritual life. I mention this. I could just as well mention another example, which is more real, for it is really the case that when most of our friends come to Dornach, a will to sacrifice is involved, and that only in the least of cases is untruthfulness involved. But I've chosen the example because it is the least applicable and thus the least harmful. If I had mentioned other examples, what I would like to have as a calm, prevailing mood in the hearts and soul of all who are sitting here now could not exist in the necessary degree. After that introduction, I would like to start with the verses that is the beginning and the end of Michael's proclamation to all in-based human beings, and which contains what all entities in the world are saying, if one listens to them with the soul. For from all that lives in the mineral, vegetable and animal kingdoms, what sparkles down from the stars, what acts into our souls from the domains of the hierarchies, from all the growths under and on the earth, as warm life from what speaks in rocks and springs, and fields and thunder and clouds and lightning. All these spoke to unbased human beings in the past, speak at the present, and will speak in the future. O man, know yourself. So resounds the world word. You hear it soul powerful. You feel its spirit wasteness. Who speaks so world fastly? Who speaks so felt heartily? Does it act through space-distant radiation in your senses being experience? Does it sound through time's wave weaves into your life's evolving stream? Is it you yourself who in space feeling, in experiencing time, creating the word, feeling foreign, sensing in space's emptiness of soul, because you have the force of thinking, losing in the time-destroying stream? The previous lesson ended, my dear sisters and brothers, with the guardian of the threshold giving the last admonition before one passes over the yawning abyss of being. The guardian of the threshold spoke the mighty, moving words. Come in, the gate is open, you will become a real human. Our souls and hearts have been exposed to the important, mighty, meaningful words spoken by the guardian of the threshold on behalf of Michael, and everything he said was to prepare us for the attitude we must have when we come over after the gate has been opened, over the yawning abyss of being, where one does not come walking with earthly feet, where one flies with the spiritual wings that grow when the soul is imbued with the spiritual attitude, with spiritual love, with spiritual feeling. And now, my dear sisters and brothers, will be described what the human being experiences when he stands on the other side of the yawning abyss of being. The guardian of the threshold indicates to him, turn around and look back. Until now you have been looking at what appeared to you as black night, cloaked gloom, about which you had to say that it will become inner light and will illumine your own self. With the last admonitions, the guardian of the threshold says, I let it become lighter at first most gently. You feel now the first light around you, but turn around, look back. And now when he who has crossed over the yawning abyss of being and turns around and looks back, he sees himself as an earthly human being. What he is during his physical incarnation over there in the part of this being that he has left behind, and which now lies in the earthly sphere. He observes his own human self there. He has embodied himself in spiritual being with the spiritual soul. The earthly environment is over there now. He stands there in the region in which we first were with all our humanity, where we saw that crawls beneath and flies above, where we saw the sparkling stars, the warmth-giving sun, where we saw what lives in the wind and weather, and where, knowing that despite all its majesty, how the sun blazes and illuminates, despite all the beauty and greatness as accessible to the senses, we said to ourselves, our own humanity is not here. We must seek in on the other side of the yawning abyss of being, in what seems at first to the sense to be black, night-cloaked gloom. The guardian of the threshold has shown by the three beasts what we actually are. Now will be described how in the gloom that is beginning to be light, we should begin to look back on what we as human are in the sensory world, together with what was our only world in sensory earthly existence. And now the guardian of the threshold points directly back there to the earthly man, which we ourselves also are during earthly existence, and to which we must continually return, into which we must always penetrate when we leave the spiritual world and return to our earthly duty. For we may not become dreamers and go into raptures. We must return completely to earthly life. Therefore the guardian of the threshold directs us to look at a person who stands over there, who we ourselves are, in a way that at first draws our attention to what this person is. And the outline of a human being is written on the blackboard to visualize this. He knows that he perceives the outer world through the senses, which are mostly situated in the head, and that he perceives his thinking through the impulse of the head. But the guardian of the threshold now says, look into this head. It is like looking into a dark cell, for you do not see the creative light within it. The truth is that what you had as thinking over there in the sensory world is merry images, not much more than mirror images. The guardian of the thresholds admonishes us to be very aware of this, but also to be aware that what is only appearance in earthly thinking is the corpse, as we have heard in previous lessons, of a living thinking in which we are immersed in the soul spiritual world before we descended to this earthly life. There thinking lived. Now thinking rests as dead thinking, as seeming thinking in the coffin of our body, and all the thinking we use in the sensory world is dead thinking. It was alive before we descended. And what has this thinking accomplished? It has created everything that is within the head, within this dark cell, as it appears to the sense that is light creating a sense. The brain, which rests within as thinking, support has been created by living thinking. It is living thinking that creates the support of our earthy semblance of thinking. Observe the brain convolutions, observe what you carry within the dark cell that enables you to think, my dear sisters and brothers. Observe the semblance of thinking in the dark cell. Then you will find in what is felt above as thinking, from out of which streams the force of will into thinking, though that each thought is streamed through with will. How the will streams into thinking can be sensed. And now we look back from the other side of the threshold at how that other person, who we ourselves are, has waves of will streaming out of his body into the head, which create the will. And finally, when we follow them back to the turning points of time, which lead to our previous incarnations, how they create the waves of thoughts from worlds past into our present incarnation and form our head, all of which makes a semblance of thinking in this incarnation possible. Therefore we must be strong, the guardian of the threshold tell us, and imagine dead thinking being cast out into the cosmic nothingness, for it is only seeming, and the willing that then arises we should consider as what comes over from previous incarnations and interweaves and works, making us thinkers. Within are the creating cosmic thoughts, the world thoughts. These creating cosmic thoughts enable us to have human thoughts. Therefore, the first words of the guardian of the threshold speaks after he has let us cross the threshold and after he has announced that the gate has opened. that we can become true human beings. The first words he speaks are, "See behind thinking's sensory light, how in the darkened spirit cell, willing rises from the body's depth. Let flow through your soul's strength, dead thinking into the world nothingness. And the will, it arises as world thought creating." The first words we hear on the other side as we look back at the figure which we ourselves are. And the first mantra is written on a blackboard. The guardian is heard in the brightening darkness. See behind thinking's sensory light, how in the darkened spirit cell, willing rises from the body's depths. Let flow through your soul's strength, dead thinking into the world nothingness. And the will, it arises as world thought creating. And then the guardian of threshold adds, and one must strain to hear him. Now imagine that you are observing that figure on the other side, who you yourself are. You turn around again and look into the darkness and try with all your inner imaginative force of remembrance, as one does when retaining a physical after image of the eye. Try with all your strength to draw before you something like a grey outline of what you saw over there, but avoid drawing anything, expect the outline of the figure. Then, if one succeeds in seeing the grey outline of a figure, behind it appears an image of the moon. And the moon will be drawn in yellow, the grey figure before it. If one is able to keep inner calm, one sees the moon in the distance. The grey figure outline is also there, but it is active in us. And if we practice this over and over, we feel we have arrived at the spiritual figure of the head that we had over there, not the physical human figure, but at the spiritual figure of the head that we had over there, if we can feel what karma brings to us from previous earthly incarnations. Therefore, you should meditate on this picture that I have drawn here, the sickly moon with this arrow. Let the mantra unfold with this picture as the marker for the gradual familiarization with what forcefully comes over from previously earthly existence. And secondly, the guardian of the threshold points with a stronger gesture to what feeling is to the person over there, who we ourselves are, and he admonishes that we are to see this feeling as a dim dream. In fact, we see feeling, which makes a person over there more real than thinking. For thinking is illusion, whereas feeling is half reality. We see the person's feeling unfold in numerous dream picture during the day. We learn by observing it that feeling for the spirit, and in the spirit is dreaming. But what kind of dreaming is feeling? In this feeling, not only the individual dreams, but within it the whole surrounding world dreams. Our thinking is our own. That's why it's illusion. The world lives in our feeling. The world exists. Existence is within it. Now we must achieve, to the extent possible, tranquility of heart. The guardian warns, so that we can extinguish what lives and interweaves as feeling in the dream pictures, just as dreams are extinguished in deep sleep. Then we can reach the truth of feeling, and we can see human feeling interwoven with the cosmic life that is present in spirit in all our surroundings. And then the real spirit human being appears to us, who in his body lives at first in this half existence. The human being appears to us from out of sleeping feeling. We feel ourselves to be on the other side of the threshold, on the other side of the yawning abyss of being, for feeling has fallen asleep in the cosmic creative powers, which live in feeling, have appeared around us. See in feeling soul weaving, as in the dreams down, life streams in from cosmic distance. Let in sleep through the calm of the heart, human feelings silently blown away, and the world's life spirited as human being power. And the second part is written on the blackboard. See in. Before it was behind, here it is in. All the words in a mantric verse are important. Feeling, soul weaving. Before it was thinking, here feeling. There sensory light, here soul weaving. Weaving is much more real than merely semblance of light. In the first part, thinking and sensory light. In the second part, feelings are underlined. As in the dreams dawn, life streams in from cosmic distance. There it was, willing arises from the body's depths. Here, life streams in from cosmic distance. In the third line of the first part, willing is underlined, and in the second part, life. Let in sleep through the calm of the heart, human feelings silently blown away. It is enhanced. Here in the first part it involved letting flow through the soul's force. Here in the second part one must blown away human feeling. The word blown is underlined. And the world's life spirited. Here in the first part it was the willing, that is still the human being. Here it is cosmic, as human being power, the enhancement relative to cosmic thought creation. The guardian of the threshold indicates to us that we should look back once again to the grey figure that stands over there, which we are ourselves in our earthly life. But this time, after having turned away in our minds, we turn it around in a circle. We will find, when we rotate the figure, that the sun appears behind it and rotates with it. And we will realize that at the moment we are brought into physical existence from the spiritual world, our etheric body has been compressed from the cosmic ether. Therefore, just as the first verse belongs to this, the drawing of the grey figure in the first verses are numbered 1. And the second verse belongs this, the drawing of the red rotating form in the second verse are numbered 2. Then the guardian of the threshold reverses us to our will, which is active in our limbs, and he strongly draws our attention to the fact that whatever relates to the will is in a sleeping state, even when we are awake. He explains how the thought works downward. I explained it last time, so may say it now. How, as the thought carries warmth downward into your limbs movement so that it becomes will. This becomes clear in spiritual cognition and spiritual seeing. Normal consciousness hides this when we are sleeping, as it hides life in general during sleep. Now we should observe the will in the limbs as though sunken in deep sleep. The will is asleep. The limbs are asleep. We should see this as a firm mental image. Then, when it is firm, we realize how thinking, the source of willing in earthly man, sinks down into the limbs. Then it becomes light in him. The will becomes bright. It wakes up. When we first see it in its sleeping state, we find that it wakes up when thinking sinks downward and light from below streams upward, which is the force of gravity. Feel the force of gravity in your legs and arms when you let them relax. That is what streams upward and which meets with the downward streaming thinking. We observe human will transformed into its reality, and thinking appearing as what ignites the will in man in an enchanting, magical way. That is the truly magical effect of thinking on the will. It is magic. Now we become aware of it. The guardian of the threshold says, see over the will's body activities in the aura, how in sleeping activity fields thinking descends from the head's forces, led through the soul imagination to light. Human will transform itself, and the thinking it appears as the will's magical being. And the third verse will be written on the blackboard. See over the will's body activities, how in sleeping activity fields thinking descends from the head's forces, led through the soul imagination to light. Human will transform itself, and the thinking it appears as the will's magical being. Now we imagine that the guardian of the threshold again points to the person over there, who we are ourselves, telling us to look and retain the picture, but not to turn around, but to let this picture sink below the surface of the earth beneath, where the figure is standing. We look over there stands the one who we ourselves are. We make the picture and develops a strong force to look below, as though a lake were there and we were looking at the image as now being within the earth, but not as a mirror image, but as an upright figure. We imagine this picture, the earth, belong the third verse. We imagine how the Earth's gravitational forces rise, how the gravitational forces illuminate the limbs, feet and arms. In later observation we acquire an idea of how gods and human cooperate between death and a new birth to arrange karma. That is what the Guardian of Threshold admonishes us about when he speaks to us for the first time after we have crossed over the yawning abyss of being. See behind thinking sensory light, how in the darkened spirit cell willing rises from the body's depth. Let flow through your soul's strength that thinking in the world nothingness, and the will it arises as world thought creating. See in feeling soul weaving, as in the dreams down life streams in from cosmic distance. Let in sleep through the calm of the heart human feeling silently blown away, and the world's life spirited as human being power. See over the will's body activities, how in sleeping activity fields, thinking descends from the head's forces. Let through the soul imagination to light, human will transform itself, and the thinking it appears as the will's magical being. The circle always closes. We are looking again at that starting point, listening to all the beings and all the processes of the world. O man, know yourself. So resounds the world word, you hear its all powerful, you feel its spirit vastness. Who speaks so world fastly, who speaks so felt heartily? Does it act through space distant radiation, in your senses being experienced? Does it sound through time's wave weaves into your life's evolving stream? Is it you yourself who in space feeling, in experiencing time, creating the word, feeling foreign, sensing in space's emptiness of soul, because you have the force of thinking losing in time-destroying stream? By this affirmation, Michael is present in this, his rightful existing school. His presence is confirmed by his sign, which should loom over everything given in the school. It is confirmed by his seal that he has impressed on the esoteric striving on the Rosenkreuzen school, and which lives on symbolically in the threefold verse. Ex Deo nascimur, in Christo moremur, per Spiritum Sanctum revivissimus. And as Michael impresses his seal, the first sentence is spoken with this gesture. The second sentence with this gesture, and the third sentence with this gesture. The first gesture means I esteem the Father. The second gesture means I love the Son. The third gesture means I unite myself to the Spirit. Thus today's Michael affirmation is confirmed by means of his sign and seals. Michael's sign is and seal is Ex Deo nascimur, in Christo moremur, per Spiritum Sanctum revivissimus. Thank you very much. And at the end I will speak the second and the third word, which we know out of the lesson number 13. Second word. Then we can perceive additional words from the same cosmic depth from which the words just spoken to us. Recognize first the earnest guardian who stands before the gate of Spirit's land, the entrance your senses forces, and your mind's power refusing, because you are in senses weaving, in thoughts shaping, from space's beinglessness, from time's deception power, the truth of own being, you must first forcefully conquer. When we have heard such words, the answering words can reverently issue from the depths of our souls. Third word. I entered this senses world, the legacy of thinking carrying with me. A God's power had led me here. The death, it stands at the way's end. I won't feel the Christ being. It wakes in the matter's death, Spirit's birth. So in the Spirit I find the world, and recognize myself in world creation. Thank you very much.